You're listening to Rule the Galaxy podcast. I'm Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dulon, Star Wars Rebels. May the Force be with you always.
Hey, Star Wars fans and Rule the Galaxy fans. It is Joe in the pilot seat for another episode, another smashing episode of the Rule the Galaxy podcast. Today, we are going to be joined by at least one, maybe two of my favorite people from across the pond. And we'll start off with the gentleman who's sitting right here talking to me before we got on air, Mr. Mark Mulcaster. Mark, how are you, sir?
Hello, I'm very well. Happy New Year to you, sir.
Happy New Year to you as well. Can you believe? I mean, we're in 2025. How
We're in
weird
the
is that?
future.
Yes,
Doesn't it feel like 2025 is like the future? You know,
I,
I thought we should have had like hover cars by now.
100%. That I think that's really the only thing we're missing, right?
Pretty
Hover
much.
cars like the Jetsons.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mark, as most of you know, with Fantha Tracks, making tracks, all those tracks that we all love to check out and listen to, go to the website, listen to their podcast. They do a great job there. So I really appreciate him hopping on board. We are hoping that Mr. Mark Newbold will hop on with us as well, but it's all about the timing, right? We'll make it
It
work.
is. Yeah, exactly.
So, but yes, going back to that future comment before we get into all the fun Star Wars topics we have, I was on vacation a while back with some family members, and somebody brought up, we're missing the hover cars or the floating cars, but we're also missing, like, people are talking about putting chips, in our head to where it's
Mhm.
kind of like we've got a computer in there already.
Yeah.
How are we that far off from that? We were just talking about AI before we hopped onto the show. How far away are we from that?
Well, do you know what? I can't think we can't be that far, but also that kind of whole chip into like people's necks and stuff, you kind of start going down a conspiracy theory kind of route very quickly. I mean, I think I'm more for the kind of like the KB skeleton crew kind of like cybernetics kind of thing, right?
There you
You
go.
know, so like maybe a bit of augmentation rather than integration in that on that level. So, but surely it's got to be around the corner. There's got to be somebody who's working on that. You know,
It does, but at the same time, we have to remember Order 66, and we have to think about
exactly. Yeah.
what could happen with that. So, somebody out there right now is trying to plan their own Order 66, and if their company is the first one that puts a chip in everybody's head, they've already got the plan laid out.
I mean, I think he takes office in like 5 days, doesn't he?
Wow. Okay. Well, we're not going to jump into that cesspool of discussions here in the Rule of the Galaxy, because believe it or not, we've had people want us to talk about that, and I've said no.
No.
That's for
Yeah,
another time.
exactly.
But so speaking of New Year's, Christmas obviously was right before that.
Yep.
Is there anything that stood out to you that you got for Christmas? I know you and Mark always talk about the bits and bobs that you get on a regular basis, but
hmm
was there anything outstanding that showed up that you were like, hey, this was a great Christmas gift?
So this was actually a really good year, just generally, because there was a good balance. Some years I get like a load of Star Wars stuff
Hmm.
and not much, say, James Bond collectibles, and then other years I get like more James Bond stuff and not enough Star Wars collectibles. But it was a decent balance. However, both me and Newbold found that neither of us got Star Wars calendars, and we normally get that. So we were both like, "What's up with that?" That's a bit kind of like shocking. So, and I still haven't actually picked up many of the 2025 Star Wars calendars, and at least over here, there's probably about 13 or 14 to kind of chase down. There's loads, you
Really?
know. Yeah, there tend to be like you get like the desk size ones and like the like
The wall.
the
Yeah.
wall ones, and then we get like these kind of like collector's editions, which kind of like you have posters. So which I don't tend. I mean, those are ones I collect, but I don't really look at them. It's really bad. I buy them, I look at them, and go, "Oh, that looks pretty cool." Puts it in the drawer and then forgets about it. So and then wonder
And
why I've got a whole drawer full of calendars. But
and in 20 years, you'll go into that storage unit you have and find all those calendars that you've been
yeah,
putting away for years.
exactly. And
Yeah.
but the good thing is but one of the fun things that is about calendars is that obviously you can try and look at the dates and work out if one's going to be back in use, like in the near future.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure there has been a couple of times when that's happened, but like nothing that really springs to mind, because also there was a bit of a jump. I don't think there's always been Star Wars calendars, but really from about 95 onwards, there's been a consistent amount, but there's probably like that dark time kind of gap. However, calendars aside, or the lack of calendars aside, what I got was it was very, very nice of my other half. She brought me this Gentle Giant milestone statue, the Han Solo's in Stormtrooper disguise. So you
Okay.
can kind of like pull his little head off and replace like the Harrison Ford head with a little Stormtrooper. So you can either have basically a Stormtrooper, or you can have Han Solo. So I've opted to have Han Solo,
Nice.
and that's it's quite big. It's probably about 9-10 inches, 12 inches big, and nice round base and stuff. So that was quite nice. How about
Good.
yourself?
Well,
What
I
did you get?
am. Yeah, I got surprised. My favorite ship is the Y-wing,
Yeah.
and it always has been. So my wife, without even telling me, because I was not planning on getting much of anything really Star Wars this year, she went out and because I'm at my home studio,
Ooh, that looks
she found
vintage.
this for me. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, it's missing some pieces, but
Yep.
nowadays it's really easy to go on eBay,
Hmm.
Mercari, something like that, and get the replacement parts. But this is, back in the Kenner days right here. So really
Yep.
excited about this Y-wing. And then our good friend of the show, Scott Rifen, always
Hmm.
goes to Disney World at Christmas.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this, but there's always a droid that they do at Christmas.
Yes.
So
Yes.
he has got me now. These were the ones from the last 2 years, and then he just added in this one. So he sent it up to me. There we go. So I got that as a surprise gift that I didn't know was coming, and then
Mm.
I did get myself one last thing that I wasn't going to do, but here in the States we play a lot of. I don't know if you would do it fantasy football over there or not, based off the soccer teams. But we do
Yeah.
fantasy football based off the NFL. And I won some money in some fantasy football. And
Nice.
so I went and
Oh, lovely.
purchased a Captain Rex helmet, cosplay helmet,
Hmm.
all
Cool.
done up. It's fantastic. I've always wanted one, but I couldn't resist, and I jumped at it, and
You've
now
got to
I've
do it.
yeah.
Every now and again, you got to treat yourself.
Yes, yes.
And actually, those droids. This is the interesting thing. What I like about those holiday special droids, as it were, is that they're really gaudy. Like they're really quite, they're quite out there, but they
Hmm.
kind of work. Whereas the Black Series Hasbro that they did with the holiday special ones, I
Yes.
don't know. I mean, I did buy those. I did kind of buy into the first couple of waves, but I'm just like, these are kind of, I don't know. There's something really tacky about it, which I know is probably part of the appeal. But like, yeah, they just. I'm not even sure if I still got them. I may have sold on the ones I had, but I was just like, yeah, if there's something, it kind of feels like it's an easy win for these companies, and
Oh yeah.
but there's something about the droids. I think it's the shape. They kind of like they take the designs a little bit better than when you just try and make a like K2SO into like a snowman or something crazy like that. So
Right.
you know,
No, I only have one of those, and I believe it's a snow trooper.
right? Yeah, yeah.
The Hoth snow trooper is done up in a holiday garb or coloring, and I think
Yeah.
that's the only one I have of those. So I haven't bought into those, but Scott's nice enough. He told me there's
Mm.
10 people that he gets them for. I'm just happy I'm on the list,
That's
and
very nice. I
yeah.
mean, and to be fair, I've listened to Mr. Scott Rifen on various different podcasts and stuff over the years. So if he wants to expand it to 11, and send one across the seas, he's more than welcome.
Well,
I might have to get him on making tracks at one point or another for
you definitely
brushing them up.
should. And
Yeah,
I know I had him and Mark Newbold on a show
yeah,
here together, and I basically sat back and just let those two riff for an
fantastic.
hour
Yeah,
because they were well into the Marvel comics. They were discussing the old radio dramas, all that
yeah,
kind of
yeah. The
stuff. So
NPR stuff. Yeah.
yep, I just sat back and let them go. But he did actually. It's a funny story, and I'm sure everybody on Rule of the Galaxy has heard it. He was in Indianapolis, where I live. He
Hmm.
found some comics that Mark needed, and Mark was in Florida at the time,
Right.
and so I think he sent them to Florida where Mark was staying,
Fantastic.
and then Mark took him back to England. So it was very, very interesting
What a top
triangle.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but yeah, everything else going well for you? Going good? Everything?
Yeah, everything's good, man. You know, we literally today just started to celebrate the 25th anniversary of a Rebel Legion. So that's
Wow.
yeah, that's kind of a big announcement today and stuff. So it's a lovely new kind of like 25th anniversary logo design, which has been designed by a friend of mine, Nick Harbour. And so the like the Rebel Legion command team, headed by Anthony Wilson, has been kind of working on that. There's a nice kind of like a message out there, you know, trying to obviously encapsulate the club over 25 years and stuff. But you know, so hopefully this is the start of like a year of celebrations for Rebel Legion. So yeah, it's
Well, that's
cool.
awesome. That's great. And we've been doing the Rule of the Galaxy for 5 years now. I
Hmm.
can't imagine being involved. I mean, I've been married for 32 years, so I can't
Yeah,
imagine being involved with
yeah,
something a long time. But
yeah.
being involved with a club or an organization like that for that long, that's pretty cool, and it's really
It's
cool they stuck
fantastic.
around. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. For me personally, I mean, I joined in like 2007, so I'm not too far off like a 20th anniversary. And I think I was trying to think actually next year, it might be next year or the year after. Again, it might be, I think maybe next year might be my 10th year as like base commanding officer of Elstree Base. Should I stay? Should nobody want to wrestle the power from my, you know, sweaty palms? But you know, which could happen, or I might just decide actually it's time to, you know, pass on the torch. But yeah, it's amazing, and obviously, I suppose in that time we've had a pandemic, so you know
yeah,
that blip. You take that out, and you're like, wow, that's, you know, that took up a lot longer than, you know, people I think realised when it came to the events. You know, I
oh
mean,
yeah,
me and Mark were at MCM Birmingham in November, and we were like, wow, this is probably the first MCM convention, which is they're owned by Reed Pop, so they're not small conventions.
right.
So this is probably the first one really that we felt like it was pre-pandemic. So you know, it's taken a few years to kind of get everything back on its feet. So
It is crazy to think about. I
yeah,
mean, we were joking around when we were talking about our 5th year anniversary, and D-Doc's had kids since then. I have 3 grandkids since then.
wow,
The pandemic occurred. I went to Italy. All these different things that have happened in just that short 5 year time frame is just
yeah.
so. The amount of things that have gone through with Rebel Legion in 25 years, that's amazing. And I know how much good they've done in the community and how much joy they bring to people. So congrats on that, and I look forward to seeing any and all announcements about that. I think that's great. And since we're talking anniversaries,
Hmm.
one of the things that I had mentioned to you and Mark to talk about was some very just simple, right in front of us anniversaries. The
Yeah,
Force Awakens is turning 10, and Revenge of the Sith is turning 20. Yeah, I know.
especially we were talking. I don't know if we talked about it on Making Tracks or if me and Mark talked about it before or after the record, but we were saying there's something about like the 25th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith feeling like it was 25 years ago, but 10 years since The Force Awakens just feels utterly bonkers because it feels like new Star Wars, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't feel like it was 10 years ago. I mean, I actually watched it like the other weekend, and it hasn't aged. You know, I mean, you think about like, I mean, and obviously, I know working in the industry, as Mark likes to remind people, that you know the difference between say 10 years of CGI between like 1999 for Phantom Menace and so
right.
2009 was a massive gulf. But now, like, it doesn't feel like any time's passed, and it's probably down to the fact that we've had film. You know, we had a big chunk of films come out every year for 5-6 years. So it's crazy, isn't it?
It's it seems like just the other day, but then with that massive gap like you talked about, it also seems like holy cow, it's been a long time since we've had a Star Wars movie, right?
Right?
Like
Yeah.
for the first 5 years, we were whipping them out left and right like it
Yeah.
was nothing, and then 2020 came along, and we're sitting here just yeah,
Yeah. Tumbleweed.
quiet, yeah, ghost town. I think looking back at it, I think it was the first one where I went to where you were buying your seats in advance and sitting
Right.
right. You weren't just lining up and hoping to get in a show. I think for me, as far as Star Wars movies go, I know
Yeah.
there were others, but Revenge of the Sith, we still weren't at the point where we were pre-buying seats, were we? I
I
can't
was.
remember.
Yeah, no, I was, because I mean, yeah, that was back
2005, right?
2005. Now, I mean, I can remember, like, for example, Phantom Menace. I had to. I can't remember. It was about 2 months before the film came out. And the film came out like 2 months after it came out in the States. If I remember correctly, it came out in like July, I think, or maybe June, something like that. I think it was July. But I can remember staying up at midnight to phone in to book for tickets for like the opening day or the opening 2 days.
Yeah.
And so the phone line, I tried before midnight at like 11:50 and 11:51, and it was like box office is closed. Bang on midnight, box office was open, and then I was in the queue for like 2 hours. Okay,
Oh man.
I booked my 6 tickets for the first 2 days, so three screenings each day, with the first screening that I could get to, which was 9 o'clock in the morning, the first screening of the day. I think it was a Thursday. Walked into this big UCI multiplex, and every single screen was Phantom Menace, but it was pretty quiet. And I sat down in the cinema and looked around just after the trailers had finished. And I'm like, there's no one else in my screen. And I was thinking, are they going to just tell me to move to another screen, or like is this a mistake? But no, they just played the film. So I
Wow.
had my own private viewing of Phantom Menace. But then I think definitely for Revenge of the Sith, I was at least booking the tickets online. Whether or not they were actually specifically reserved seats or not.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I
that,
think you're
yeah,
probably right. We could buy tickets. I'm not sure I could find get it like seat,
yeah,
E4 or
yeah.
whatever.
I mean,
Um,
I don't know if you're like me. So like we have a Cineworld near us with like 14 screens. Okay, I have on my phone. I have like in Apple Notes. I have like every single screen listed and the preferred as in, like the center seats, and next to it will be like if there's an annoying fire exit on a certain
oh,
yeah, I know.
no, that's
So,
great.
but
That's
but
great.
it's also shared with my partner. So if she's booking cinematic seats, she always checks that before she books, and then she'll be like, "I can't get like row F. Is row like G all right?" And it's like, "What screen?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's probably fine," But it's kind of like, but it took all. I mean, it basically took the sequel trilogy, at least most of the Force Awakens, for me to have actually been to most of those screens and actually have worked it out, because I'd moved in with her about 2 or 3 years later, so it actually wouldn't have been Force Awakens. It would have been like maybe Rogue One or even Rise of Skywalker. So every time I'd booked a cinema seat, I would go in there and then open up my little note and go, "Yeah, I was right," or "No, actually, you probably want to go like two rows forward and maybe two seats to the left." So,
That's fantastic. I
yeah.
love it. That way, that's a passion right there. That's true passion
Well,
when you put that
yeah.
much effort into it.
But then, I mean, I don't know about you, but like, I mean, with the sequel trilogy and the fact that they released all these different formats, so you had like, you had it in IMAX, you had it in like 3D, you had it in 4DX, you had it in 2D and that, and and then later on with from probably Last Jedi, you then had Dolby Atmos, and then for Rise of Skywalker, you would then also have Dolby Vision with Dolby Atmos. I would go and try and make sure I'd see it in every single format as well.
Okay.
Just because, I mean, I guess that's probably the part of me that works in TV and film, so kind of wants to experience that,
Yeah.
especially with like Dolby Atmos and HDR. That was very kind of emerging in the cinema kind of space at the time. Kind of wanted to experience like Star Wars in those formats. I mean, because look at
Sure.
where's 3D now, compared to where it was in say 2012. So
Right. No, that's good to know. I'm looking back at it and I'm thinking to myself, 2015 obviously didn't have Rule of the Galaxy going. That was 5 years before that happened. I was telling
long
some of
time.
the yeah, I was telling some of the crew the other night that me, some of my friends, some of my relatives, we with that 5 year span of movies that came out with Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Rogue Squadron,
Yeah.
Solo, and the Rise of Skywalker. we basically made it a plan to where when one of those was coming out, we would backtrack X amount of months, and
Hmm.
once a month we would watch the movies in order
Yeah, yeah,
until we got to that movie. So obviously, it was very easy to watch the first six before we went into, you know, the Force Awakens. But then it kept expanding, right? And then
yeah,
we were
yeah,
like,
yeah,
okay, before we go into Last Jedi, now we've got to watch that. Plus, we've got to watch Force Awakens.
yeah.
Plus, we're adding in all. So it was exciting to do that, and it really built up the conversation and our
Mm,
depth of thinking of the movies because we were doing a recap um, before podcasting. We
yeah,
would do that. We'd watch them, and then afterwards, we'd sit around and talk for a few hours about the movie. And we did that for basically those 5 years, right?
yeah,
And so that really got myself and my son motivated to start this because we thought we've been rehashing and relooking and having new discussions over all these movies, and it really started because the Force Awakens and with it coming out.
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm gonna clear a throat.
Yeah, and I think actually, especially with The Force Awakens, I mean, there probably wasn't a film since the Phantom Menace which had quite so much hype and expectation. And I think really what they did so well with the marketing of The Force Awakens was it was a real kind of like they really honed the whole nostalgia message. It
Oh
was
yeah,
like, remember how you felt when you were like 7 years old when you watched Star Wars for the first time. This is how we're going to make you feel, and yeah. Let's be fair. I mean, they could never do that again for like Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker because by that point we're in there. But up
right.
to that point, the expectation and I mean I can remember doing that as well. Kind of like the week before Force Awakens was like rewatching the six films before that. And obviously before that, since that September, you had Journey of the Force Awakens, so you had the whole kind of
Hmm.
publishing program, and listening to like Aftermath and that on audiobook and
Oh
all the
yeah,
other ones and stuff, and then also kind of like trying to work out what some of this stuff could mean in terms of like, oh, what are we going to see? What, are we going to see Are we going to see Mon Mothma in because she's in Aftermath? Are we going to see any of
right.
this stuff in Force Awakens? It's like yeah, not yeah,
Well, it was
but
an exciting time.
it
I will say
was.
that.
Yeah.
And it was a good build up. And I was saying the other night in the show, Force Awakens actually, well, it's my favorite of the sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
And,
Mhm.
and it left me like I watched it and I went home and me, my brother, my son, and a few other people sat around and talked for hours after
Yeah.
we watched it because we were like, the world's wide open. We have no idea where this is going to go,
Yeah.
right? Where it left on that
Blue sky thinking.
cliffhanger, it was a fantastic way to kick off that new trilogy, in my opinion. Yes, Han Solo died, but outside of that, everything else was pretty cool. A lot of great things in it, and
Yeah.
and a lot of good world building, so on and so forth.
And I think that's the thing, wasn't it? Like they really tried to kind of craft a different corner of the galaxy that we're inhabiting and exploring about. And I mean, and I suppose that was the genius of like J.J. Abrams, and it's always been the genius. He can ask more questions than he ever answers. But that year between The Force Awakens and Last Jedi, the what's Luke going to do? Is he, how is
Yes.
he going to pick? It's crazy, and I mean, I don't even want to get into Last Jedi, which is a film that I do love, but also at the same time appreciate why a lot of people don't love it. So
Yeah.
I don't need to kind of sit here and defend it, but I probably could wax on about it, especially before Newbold's on, because like
Oh gosh.
he really doesn't like it. But also actually he may have changed, but before he was like he would not go on record to say that he didn't like a Star Wars film, like he didn't like it. But so if he's on, maybe let's see if we can do that. Let's see if we
Okay.
can get him to
I
admit, you know,
we'll bring that up. We'll bring that
it
up.
might be an easy win. He might be like, yeah, it's utter nonsense. But yeah, but it was that time, wasn't it? It's blue sky thinking. And because of the way they were kind of like managing the narrative, and anything that was coming out was kind of like in the publishing programs and stuff like that was kind of a little bit vague, and it's
Oh,
kind of like
very vague.
and so which is kind of a shame in some level. You kind of wish that obviously and I'm sure we've talked about this before, and if not, why not? But you kind of wish there was a better kind of like overarching story, like hashed out to begin with. So then maybe some of this kind of ancillary material would mean a little bit more and be tied in a little bit better. But I guess, that's just it is what it is.
It's
So,
one of those little corners of Star Wars history. I mean,
yeah,
it's the mystery box wrapped up in
in an
different
enigma.
directors inside of Enigma. Yes, I mean, so that it is what it is, and
Yeah.
we'll let it go. Except to say, I think it was a very exciting time to be a Star Wars fan
Oh yeah.
when the Force Awakens was coming out, and then we look back at Revenge of the Sith, and
Mm,
I remember, my son was 12 or 13 when we went to
yeah.
see that, and so I was 6, 9, 12 during the original trilogy. He
Right.
was about 6, 9, 12 with the prequel trilogy.
Fantastic.
So I got to watch those through his eyes,
Yeah.
and at the same time, have him have his own Star Wars. But then I looked at it, and I remember thinking to myself, well, this is something I've been involved with or been, impassioned about since 1977, and it's coming to a close. And I
Yeah.
wasn't sure where I felt about it because I did love the books. I did love reading all the novels that had come out since the 90s, and I wasn't sure what direction it was going to go, but I did feel like at least it tied up the story well enough to where you could see the rise and the fall and the redemption of
Yeah.
Darth Vader, of Anakin Skywalker. So I felt like it did tie that bow on it. I remember my mom always wanted me to take her to go see the prequel movies because she watched me grow up with the original trilogy.
Mm.
And so one time I took her and like my wife and we went and watched Revenge of the Sith, and we finished, and she looked at me, she goes, does that satisfy you? Is that what you wanted to see, now that it's coming to an end? And
Yeah.
I thought, I mean, I don't want it to end, but it was a fantastic ride. It was a
Yeah.
lot of fun, and I did feel like, okay, we've tied it in a bow. We'll see where it goes from here.
Well, that's it. I mean, there was that natural conclusion to the point whereby, I mean, I was, yeah. So where was I? So literally, 2005. I would have just been starting to work at Sky, where I am now,
Okay.
as a trainee editor. So I would have seen, taken off the time that first year to go and see Star Wars and stuff. But I can remember kind of going home, and I still live in my folks because what, 20, 22 maybe, something like that, 23, maybe a little bit older, 24. Hey, anyhow, but I'd seen like Revenge of the Sith for probably about the fifth or sixth time, and I kind of walked into my bedroom and I kind of looked around, and I had like two cabinets which had like a lot of my vintage and kind of
Hmm.
pricey stuff, but like the rest of the walls was just all prequel stuff, and I was like, do you know what? I don't, the circle's kind of complete. I don't think I need this stuff anymore. And literally the next day, listed the whole prequel collection on eBay. Just a one big, giant job lot. So sold it to some guy in Germany.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and it was. I mean, it probably wasn't complete, but it was pretty exhaustive when it came to like all the Hasbro stuff. Again, probably if I was to look at the till receipts compared to what I got, didn't make a dollar on it, but it kind of actually was kind of refreshing because at that point I was like, well, look, Star Wars is going to transition into something else, and I'm going to transition. Actually, let's rephrase that. I'm going to change my. I'm, I'm going to change my fandom, like at least my priorities or like how I'm collecting my collecting habits, and that kind of
Sure.
gave me a bit of scope. But it was one of those weird things because then we didn't really know, and then we got the Clone Wars kind of announcement and stuff, and you're kind of like, okay. And actually, looking back at it now, you think about all that kind of Clone Wars era related content that we've got, which we would never have had if it wasn't for the prequel trilogy.
Yep.
So it is a gift that still kind of really keeps on giving.
It is, and I went through two massive kind of voids in my Star Wars fandom
Mm.
because by the time Return of the Jedi finished, I was getting ready to head into high school. And when I went into high school, and we're going to add this handsome young man here in a second. There we go. Mr. Newbold is joining us. Mark, you're catching us right in the middle of a little flashback to Revenge of the Sith and Force Awakens with their anniversaries. But I was like, hey, I'm going to chase girls, get into sports, and Star Wars is kind of done for me. So I put it all away
Yeah.
in 83 or whatever. And then Timothy Zahn's novel came out in 1991. Opened my eyes again. I said, okay, now I'm back into it. After Revenge of the Sith was over, I was so busy with work and life and raising kids that initial run of the Clone Wars stuff that came out, it didn't catch me. I did not gravitate to it. I thought it was something, just a distraction. But then basically once I got streaming services going, and what was it on Netflix, I believe?
Yeah, Netflix.
Once that was on there, boom, it lit it back up, and then next thing you know, here we go with now I'm listening to podcasts about Star Wars, and I'm listening to Rebel Force Radio, and I'm listening to Mark Newbold on I don't even remember which one he was on at the time.
1138.
There we go, 1138, and so that rekindled everything. But so you have your definite peaks and valleys with Star Wars fandom, and that's okay. But Mark, welcome to the show. Me and Mr. Mulcaster have been having a great conversation. We're glad you're here. Are you feeling okay? I know recently I listened to a show. You were under the weather.
I'm coming at the back end of that, so I'm feeling a lot better. Me and Mark recorded earlier. The reason I'm late, and I'll tell you straight up, is that we got a new air fryer, and we've just cooked the very first thing we've ever cooked in the air fryer, and we were both rather excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Mark. The chicken came out so well that we had to eat the chicken, and then I looked at the clock, and it was 10:02, and I should have been here at past, and so hence my lateness. So I can only blame chicken.
That's perfectly okay. You know what? A good meal is always a good excuse, so don't worry about that.
I thought that. I needed my energy to be on here. That's what it was.
What we did do, we spent the first 20 minutes, we were just talking about The Last Jedi, right, Mark?
Pretty much. We were talking about, it was appreciated. the look on his face. Because I was just saying to Joe, just like how we were talking like the other day before making tracks, and how you were saying like how impressed and how much you love that film. Like you were saying to me that you thought it was probably the best sequel trilogy film.
Mark, he's setting you up to take a dive here, so don't.
I feel bad because I thought I'd done the freeze thing, but I could see the water moving like that, so I knew I couldn't get away with it. I don't know what film we're talking about, Mark. I've got no idea what film we're talking about.
I rest my case, listeners. There we go.
There we go. Well,
thank you.
I'm glad to have you both here, and goodness, I tell you what, I hope I'm not catching something while you're coming off of this. But we talked briefly about our Christmases. Mark, was there anything Christmas special Star Wars that you got that we can catch up with?
I'm trying to think if I got anything Star Wars for Christmas. Nothing I can remember.
Okay.
There's always little knickknacks, but nothing major. Although I'm sure when I ask Ruth later, she'll say, "Oh, so you forgot the blah blah that I got you," because I'm rubbish with presents. I don't know. I can't remember. I'm sure I got something. I know my sister's got me a couple of Essential Legends collection books. So I've got the Han Solo trilogy and the Lando trilogy coming. I do know they're coming, but they don't usually turn up till March. So it'll be my birthday before I see them.
There we go. That's all right. You got something to look forward to. We did also touch base real quick on The Force Awakens and Revenge of the Sith, with it being their anniversaries this year. Any special memories from either one of those movies before we move on to some other things that stand out to you?
Sith, I was still running my old site Lightsaber back in 2005, so that was a big year for us. We did a big refresh and changed the tone of the site. So Sith was, it felt like the end, didn't it? That was it done, and the circle is now complete, and all the the stuff that they were marketing at the time. Bonnie Burton was giving out those rubber wristbands everybody used to wear with the circle is now complete on it at Celebration Europe. So happy memories of Sith, and obviously it wasn't the end. And Force Awakens, like me and Mark were talking about on a recent episode of Making Tracks, Revenge of the Sith feels like 20 years ago. Force Awakens feels like about 3 years ago. I can't believe that's 10 years. I've told this story before. I got very lucky. A friend of mine who passed away last year, Craig, managed to have a spare ticket to the after party, and me and Ruth got into the Force Awakens after party. and which was so fortuitous. Not only because we got into it, but because my wife's in a wheelchair. Not fortuitous, she's in a wheelchair, but that you get in as a carer. Don't laugh.
Yeah.
That you get in as a carer, so it's like 2 for 1, and I love 2 for 1. Who doesn't
Love
love
it.
a bog off? So we both got into the after party, and my claim to fame is that I was the guy that ran over Oscar Isaac's foot.
Oh, great,
Yeah.
googly moogly. Okay,
Amazing.
I'm sure he remembers that to this day.
I'm sure he does.
It does. It seems like it was just the other day. It's kind of weird, but if you think about it, for guys like you and me who went and saw Star Wars in 1977, flash forward to 87, how different was our lives from 1977 to 87? We went from being 6-year-old kids to 16-year-olds, driving cars, chasing girls, all that kind of stuff. So life changes pretty quick in 10 years to think about that.
And that's kind of what I experienced with the prequels, because I mean, I was 18 in 1999, so like, you know, so that whole prequel trilogy was kind of a very transitional. I was like, you know, in college and university, and then start work and stuff, and suddenly you are slightly more distracted by other things, you know, trying to, you know, rule the galaxy with band, and you know, fighting off like groupies and stuff like that, and you know, but yeah, those were the days.
Wow, where's that tumbleweed sound effect?
Wow. So before we get into Skeleton Crew, which I know we want to hit on, especially with it just finishing the other day, talked about Revenge of the Sith, talked about Force Awakens, some interesting things that popped up that I wasn't even thinking about because I hadn't looked at the schedule, but Andor Season 2 starts end of April, and I believe Celebration Japan is, a week before? So I'm hoping, Mark, either of the Marks, are you going to Celebration Japan? And then what are your thoughts on, okay, Mr. Newbold is, and then what are your thoughts on Andor Season 2? I personally was one of those people that it was a slow, steady build for Andor Season 1. I was not sure I was going to buy into it, but halfway through, I was all the way in, and at the end, I was like, I can't wait to see Season 2, and so I'm very excited, but both those things coming up. Give me your thoughts on either Celebration Japan or Andor Season 2. Mark Mulcaster, you start us on Andor.
Well, I mean, my thoughts of Celebration Japan is that I'm not going to be there, so it's going to suck. But but no, I mean, it's I think it's because, like I said, there's a couple of anniversaries, so that means that hopefully you're going to have some good content with that, and some of the signers are quite interesting. If John Boyega is going to be there, then you wonder, is there like an announcement on the cards, or is this just purely for the Force Awakens? I mean, I would have loved to have gone, but the thing is, it's one of those places. I think if I'm going to go to Japan, I'm probably only ever going to go to Japan once, so I probably need to spend a lot of time there, and it just wasn't likely to happen. And I don't think I could justify spending like 4 or 5 days in a convention center when there's the rest of Japan to kind of like explore and stuff.
Sure.
So, but I mean, Newbold's going to be there, so he's keeping the British end up for us. So
well, Mr. Newbold, when it comes to Celebration Japan, my uncle, who actually is my dad's youngest brother, and I am 4 months older than. Don't worry about the math. My uncle, Matt Molinaro, will be there. He is actually going to be doing some speaking. He's very big into collecting. So he is all pretty much original trilogy collecting. They'll be handing out all kinds of things. So if you get the chance, make sure you hang out with or get together with my Uncle Matt. So if you see that name anywhere, make sure you go up and introduce yourself and let him know that you and I talk all the time. So
absolutely, definitely will.
Is he going to be on the collector's track then? The the panels. Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah, because they do. A matter of fact, he showed me his Christmas present. The gentleman. Oh gosh, I'm blanking his name. Jim Swearingen.
Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, Jim did. Because he and his wife know Jim very well. She reached out to him and said, "Hey, Matthew's favorite character is C-3PO." Jim did some artwork of C-3PO just for Matt. That was his Christmas present, was an original C-3PO by Jim Swearingen. So he's very excited. He showed it to me. I was like a little jealous, not going to lie. But yeah, so keep your eye out for him and check out and see if you guys can meet up. Good guy.
Definitely, yeah. Very much looking forward to it. A bit like Mark, we're going for think we're going for 13 days in the end. The convention's only 3. It's a smaller convention this time.
Mm.
So the plan is to get out there and see as much, because I don't think I'll get out there again unless, something amazing happens or they announce Celebration in 27s in Japan, because everyone will be going to that one. So try and see as much of the island as possible, because, like you say, it's especially for us in sort of Western Europe, it's probably a one and done. I'd be surprised if we had the chance to get over, because if it's another 17 years until the next one, like the last one was, or 18 years by the time it goes, I'll be in my 70s by then. I mean, I'd like to think I'll still be doing conventions, but maybe not Japan when I'm 71. But who knows? Hey, you never know.
Well, I'll tell you what, that does sound like a plan, though, because I have a feeling you're right. 2027 will be the big blowout convention, and everyone in the world will be going to that. So if we don't get a chance, the 3 of us, to meet up anytime before then, which I will still keep trying to make happen, but if we don't, 2027 it is. We'll put it on the date, and we'll all grab a beverage, sit down, hang out, and all that kind of stuff. So, are you going to be running anything or managing anything while you're out there, or just going for fun?
Just for fun this time. There is a podcast stage. There is the what they called it last time, Holonet News stage. They changed the name. Excuse me, but it's a much smaller stage this time, so they don't need managers. So I'm not involved with that this time. There is a Fantha Tracks podcast that made it onto the podcast stage, so we'll be doing that. Nice. And we have pitched for a panel, which we haven't had accepted yet, but fingers crossed. So so we'll have plenty to do. Like I say, it's a 3-day show, so it will scoot by. But very much looking forward to it, obviously.
And I have a feeling, because it's only a few days before Andor Season 2, the first episode of Andor will probably be premiered to a select few people there at Celebration Japan.
I mean, you'd like to think so, wouldn't you? I mean, they did that with Kenobi, so it makes sense.
I like the layout of Andor this time. I think the abbreviated version with 3 episodes for 1 year, 3 episodes for the next year, leading right up to before Rogue One, is going to be a very fun way to do it. We know that K2SO is coming back. We know that Krennic is coming back. I'm sure there's other people I'm blanking, Mon Mothma, all that. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And I think it's going to be right up there with the show we're going to talk about in a little bit with Skeleton Crew as to how much we're going to like it. I think they're going to do a good job. I'm looking forward to it. I think they're going to have a hard time messing this one up. I think it's going in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think also because it's really ramping up now, militarily as much as anything else. You can see they're starting to pull fleets together. They're starting to pull different things together. They've got to have that in place by the end of the season, because they do the attack on Scarif and they're technically and militarily ready to do it. So I think to see all of those things come together, it feels like this could be more action packed even than season 1.
It's going to be a good one, and I think it's going to make Rogue One even more important and special to people. I think already a lot of people kind of pinch themselves and say, do I like Rogue One as much as I do compared to all these Star Wars? Because you're thinking it's kind of that offshoot, right? There's no really very little of the big 3, or it wasn't a Skywalker named movie, but everybody I talk to says, man, I just really like Rogue One. And like the Clone Wars did to the prequels, I think Andor is going to build that extra oomph into Rogue One, take it to a higher level.
Yeah, I mean, because I think like Rogue One in itself kind of hangs off of the coattails of the OT, and so therefore, because it's the only let's call it modern Disney era film that's really kind of set in that so closely to the OT. I mean, Solo is kind of like in its kind of its own pocket, really, isn't it? But this is so close up to obviously A New Hope that it's just full of iconography that we're all comfortable like looking at. We kind of know where we are with it as well, and I think that's part of it as well. I know there was some time, some people were like, oh, I don't understand, so is this with Rey or is this not, and what have you. But I think when you see a stormtrooper and you know what you're looking at an X-wing and stuff, like you like bang, I know exactly where I am,
Right.
So
yeah. And it's a good point about Solo, because Solo's kind of anecdotally connected. Oh, that's where Han and Chewie met. That's where Lando and Han had the falling out. And it's all the little stories we'd heard over the years. But Rogue One, it's thematically connected. It's literally connected because of the battles and the Tantive 4 and all those elements. stealing the plans was something we read about in the scroll up. So Rogue One is more. It's a good point. It's more connected than Solo, but it's no. I'm not saying Rogue One's a better film than Solo, because Solo never ever got the credit it deserved. But yeah, I'm very excited for Andor. I think it's going to be very special. And also watching Rogue One after we've seen the end of Andor season 2, it's weird when you think Rogue One is Jin's film.
Yeah,
but we will not be able to watch that film without focusing on Cassian, because that's the payoff for 2 seasons of Andor, isn't it?
Yeah. I got to wonder, does she make a surprise appearance to Saw? I mean, I know they don't run into each other, but could there be any coinciding stories with Mon Mothma, with Bail, with those people, to where they might tangentially pop into something? I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I think that's quite possible. Like in Andor 2, kind of getting Bale and that, because obviously you've got that whole political intrigue. Whether or not you see Jin in it or not, even if it's just a little kind of cameo, would be interesting. Might make it a little bit small, in the grand scheme of things. But I mean, what is probably quite an interesting little experiment would be to actually controversially watch Rogue One and then skip straight from Rogue One, ignore the scroll up, and just go straight into when you see the Tantive 4 kind of fly over the screen, and just so it's like one continuous 4.5 hour long film. That might be something I have to do in the edit suite.
You know what? You've got the power and the tools. I say you do it.
Industry professional, Mark is,
Yeah, I've heard that already. Industry professional. I will tell you, I have been so lucky. Talking to Scott Rifen the other day, we were doing a show, and I somehow lucked into, because we would have a lot of authors on Rule of the Galaxy, the Star Wars press or the literature side has allowed me to now start getting some of those preview books.
Cool.
Which has been fantastic. That Star Wars Reign of the Empire,
Yeah.
I just jumped into that. I'm trying to read it as fast as I can, but it's I'm
big.
not allowed to give anybody anything, but I can tell you, you're gonna like it. And I think Alexander Freed is the first author of the group. Those books, yeah, it's putting all this meat and potatoes that we all like about the building of the rebellion in the politics. So when I can open my mouth, I will. But I will tell you, it's been awesome to have the chance. And anybody who's thinking about buying it, I'm telling you way in advance to buy it, because it's going to be good. So
yeah, I know a couple of people who've read it. Brian on our site's read it, and he doesn't excuse me, he doesn't give much away, and he doesn't give much credit if he doesn't deserve the credit, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And he was raving about it. He really rated it. So I took that as a high bar. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Well, good. So I feel good that me and another gentleman are feeling the same way on that. Before we hop into Skeleton Crew, 2 quick things. One, two. In Ahsoka 2, we're looking at a new Balin skull. And I know you guys are probably Game of Thrones guys. Rory McCann, the Hound. I have just started Game of Thrones. I was never a Game of Thrones guy. So I just saw my first sighting of him the other day. You know what? I'm willing to give this a shot. The character was good. I think the story needed to be continued. So I'm glad they're not bypassing it or going in a different direction. Any thoughts on that? Or maybe a Ewan McGregor or Anakin Skywalker or Greenblatt reappearance? I mean, are you guys pumped about Ahsoka 2 as well?
Go on, Mark. Go on. Yeah, you look happy. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, again, like Ahsoka kind of was one of those series that I don't think got quite the due it was deserved. I think it was a little bit underrated, a smidge. So, and to your point, yeah, I mean, you're seeing Game of Thrones like Rory McCann kind of, he eats up the screen.
Yeah.
He's got just such a big presence. So, and that's the thing. Balin Skull was such an interesting character. I think it would be wrong to not carry it on. I mean, and obviously, I know many people have had these conversations about, like, when is a character bigger than the actor, and I think sometimes I think you have to serve a story rather than
100%.
maybe nothing else. So so that's going to be cool. I think it's where Ahsoka took us and where it's left us. It isn't anywhere that I could have actually ever imagined that we would have gone. So it kind of like is that slight open playing field, and it's a little bit more blue sky than maybe we've had in some of the other series recently.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think he's going to do a cracking job. He's fantastic in Game of Thrones, and if you're just starting it, I promise you, he gets better, better,
Oh yeah,
better,
yeah.
better. You know, you really end up rooting for the guy, and I won't say it on a family friendly show, but he's a bit of a bleep.
Yeah.
But he's consistently great. And we've known him for years in different things. He was in Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and bits and bobs like that, and he's appeared in various things. I think it was in one of the Jumanji films. He was in Gladiator 2 briefly, so he's been in lots of things. And him and Ray Stevenson were friends as well, which is kind of nice. So I think he'll do a great job. Really do.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that and seeing more about him in Game of Thrones. I will throw this by you real quick, just for fun. Have either one of you been to Italy? Mark Newbold, I believe you said you've been to Italy before, correct?
Very briefly. We did a cruise about 10 years ago, and we stopped in Rome for a bit, and we stopped in Sorrento for a bit, and worked our way down the coast. So it was more of a cruise than an actual visit. My wife's been loads of times, but yeah.
Mr. Mulcaster, have you been to Italy?
I have. But probably even briefer than Mr. Newbold. I was. I was there for like 4 days. My band was booked to play a wedding gig when I was in a covers band and stuff. So that was kind of like North Italy, kind of Lake Como kind of area. Beautiful country, beautiful people. I mean, and it was absolutely amazing weather. So,
and they let you stay for 4 days.
Yeah, just. Yeah. But that is because by comparison, because the rest of the band was like drunk literally 24/7, I was a golden sober boy. So
Good for you.
Designated driver.
Exactly.
Well, I only bug you because one, I'm planning my trip back in September of this year.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Yes, and I loved it so much first time. My wife and I are going back. But two, we're doing a fun thing. Now that I'm so much into Rule of the Galaxy and doing this on my own, I've talked her into saying, hey, now that we're empty nesters, let's talk on a podcast about all the places we go. And so we just started. We're 4 or 5 episodes in, but we're definitely going to talk to people who have gone to Italy a lot, who plan on going to Italy a lot, and talk about our trips and so on and so forth. So yeah, so I was gonna, if you had been a lot, I was gonna pick your brains for a lot of information. But since it's more on the peripheral, yeah.
I mean, funnily, actually, me and my partner Karen, we were looking at going to Italy in September for a week.
Come on.
Partly because let's do it. I mean, partly because I want to go to like Matera, which No Time to Die filming location and stuff like that. But also, I think you've got to go to Rome at least once in your life, don't you? You know, so trying to do that. That's the plan.
All roads lead to Rome. You are correct. So, well, if you know what, let's keep this calendar thing going. Maybe you and I make a surprise meet up and have a dinner in some place in Italy in September of 2025.
I've got visions of like, a scene from Lady and the Tramp with a bowl of bolognese.
Oh my gosh. Well, I know we're going to speak more about Skeleton Crew. We're going to speak more about that in future times and episodes. But right now, I will just jump into this because it was one that I went into with no thoughts, no ideas, no preconceived notions. And I thought to myself, the previous show that the three of us spoke about, we don't talk about it a lot on this show. So I was like, I feel like I've been a little bit burnt on some things. So I want something to catch me and make me love Star Wars. And I can realistically tell you that I loved every episode. There was not one episode where I left going, that was a filler or that was a downer. The actors were fantastic. The world building was fantastic. The kids who were in it were so good at the jobs they were playing. It made me feel like I brought up before. Stranger Things caught me because I was 12 in 1983, and that's when they were 12. It just got me right there. I felt like I was transported right back to sitting in the room with them. I could see myself at their age being and doing exactly what these kids did in this show. And I will just say Jude Law, we joke about whether he's an A-list actor or not. because let's face it, he has a huge resume. But is he Tom Hanks? Is he I don't know, Leonardo DiCaprio? He's probably not. But he is a top flight actor, and he did a fantastic job in the show, and I wasn't even worried that it ended up him being the true bad guy in this show. He did such a good job. So that's my spiel to start it. I want to hear from you guys. Any scene, any episode, whatever you want to cover. I'll just say 2 thumbs way up on Skeleton Crew from Joe.
Oh, wasn't it always me? Well, you know what I'm going to say. You know what I'm going to say. I mean, like at least with this week's episode, it was all about the gratuitous bath scene with Neil. I mean,
twice, 2 bath scenes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's like, yeah, that's an interesting. But to your point, I think, I mean, Jude Law is one of those kind of actors that I've probably seen in a ton of stuff and not really kind of given him much thought, and sometimes surprised that he turns up in other stuff like, Captain Marvel, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I was kind of a little bit like, going into this will be interesting. How's this gonna play? But yeah, I mean, to your point, he had this really good way of dominating the screen when he needed to, but not overpowering the younger actors, and being able to kind of really bounce off them with the energy in a way that felt like he was really giving his performance to them as well, rather than just kind of like it's all about me and the Jude Law show. I mean, I was kind of. I think I said last week's reaction crew, I was kind of maybe expecting like a final kind of like little turn at the end where he kind of becomes kind of good and maybe rescues one of the kids because he's ultimately a good guy. Kind of glad we kind of didn't get that, but at the same time, the ending was, the last shot of him felt a little bit ambiguous as to what he was kind of smiling about. I liked how the show just kind of, it had a nice pace to it. Like you said, it didn't feel rushed. There were a couple of like episodes near the end I thought were kind of slower, but then we needed that just to kind of create a bit more dynamism in the actual pacing. But I mean, yeah, there was nothing I could say was bad about this show from start to finish. And to be fair, I think it palate cleansed for me as well as much as it did for you, Joe. So can't say anything bad about it.
Good.
Yeah, I agree with that. We should have known Jude would be good with kids because you go back to 2001 AI with Joel Osment. He was great with that kid in that film. So we know we've not even mentioned that's just kind of come to mind, but we've seen him with kids before and he was great with kids. So that made sense. I mean, I enjoyed Acolyte. I really did, but I didn't come away from every episode as a couple. Don't get me wrong. Certainly mid-season, it was absolutely on full throttle. But I think I've come away from every episode, and Mark knows this because we talk about it. Going, wow, that was ace. That was really cool. Yeah. And I think it's exactly like you said, Joe. It's got that Stranger Things vibe because we're the same age. So I was 12 in '83. Jedi had come out. What's the rest of my life going to be like without Star Wars? So I get into all this other stuff, and just their whole outlook on life and the hopefulness and thinking you know more than you actually do. And there was so many elements to the kids that played out so well. And another thing that I loved was every time they laid something down, it paid off. We talked about this earlier. That for example, the gun on Anatron, yes. That Neil gets to play around with and see what it's about. And is it Hina that shows him how that all works? And then at the end of this episode, near the end of this episode, I know what to do. And he goes to the gun and fires the shots at the pirate ship. So that every little thing like that had a payoff. They didn't lay anything out that didn't get resolved or at least nodded back to. In terms of writing, I thought that was brilliant. And like Mark says, yes, that the pace did dip a little bit for those last 2 episodes. But then that gave them the chance, especially in the KB episode, to sort of delve into some character stuff. I mean, that episode was fantastic. So, like you said, Joe, I can't honestly think of one episode where I thought that wasn't as good as last week or that didn't really work, because you do get episodes in a season of Mandalorian where it's like, that kind of feels a little bit like filler. Hey, Jack Black, hey, Lizzo, hey, whatever,
Hey, Frog Lady.
Yeah. And as visually interesting as they are, well, the visuals on this were fantastic, and the music was amazing. I loved the end of this final episode, looking at sort of Wim's storybook and the final pages, the four of them. Everything. Excuse me, everything about it just worked. And I suppose if you want to call it a palate cleanser, yes. I wouldn't put it in those terms because I wouldn't want to compare Acolyte to Skeleton Crew. They're so different.
Contrastly different, yeah. But I think
100% different shows.
I think, not that Acolyte left a bad taste in my mouth, but it was a refreshing change of tone. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
But, I liked a lot about Acolyte in terms of the world building and stuff. But I liked that this felt like we were kind of getting back to a kind of patter that we haven't seen in Star Wars for a long time.
A long time.
So
Since Force Awakens.
Yeah. So like this show does leave a lot of questions at the end because of all the things they set up, right?
Mhm.
And I think we all agree having questions in Star Wars and not always having all of them answered is perfectly okay. And it leads to a mystery. It leads to world building in your head or imagination, right? Going back to the Acolyte real quick, I think they left a lot of questions, but they were foundational questions that I felt like needed to be answered.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it missed. There were characters that I liked. There were scenes that I liked. There were things that I was hoping it would go and do. And it had every opportunity to do that. And, Alfie and I always said, Sith, a show about Sith, let's go. Put it on. I'll watch it. But I think it was that foundational thing that you left going, I don't know where that's going, or I don't know where. And this show would leave you with a cliffhanger or a mystery, and you were more excited thinking about, whoa, I can't wait to see where that goes, or that mystery. Now it's got me thinking of something cool that could happen or come from that. So the having 1,139 warehouses or storages of all these credits, and now we're thinking all these things like does it go into the whole story of Star Wars, or is it still kind of its own standalone? Because we have the New Republic, we have Exegol, and all of that, but the New Republic was just there. I mean, you would think they would camp down and go, whoa, what are all these credits doing here? We've got some things we need to rebuild after the Galactic Civil War, right?
Exactly.
So there's a lot of different storylines that could follow this. And unlike Broom Boy, and I'll just throw that out there, where I was like, Broom Boy, I don't know if I want him to come back. And I see where they were leaving it to where it's like your imagination, right? Any of us could be Broom Boy. Got it. But seeing Wim look around when he knew he didn't have to take his assessments, it put a spark in my head like, I wonder what his next adventure is going to be.
Exactly.
I wonder what's in store for him. And so, I mean, that's kind of the difference I see. It's not a hatred, good, bad, whatever. It was just a totally different show compared to
it's different style, isn't it, really? And that's kind of, I guess, where we've kind of been lucky and also maybe cursed slightly with the Disney Plus Star Wars, is that like every kind of series kind of has its own kind of tone, and they kind of try and kind of experiment, which is you have to do in the creative sphere, otherwise it all looks and sounds the same. But this, I think this had a really, I think for one, obviously, the whole kind of like, we've got to get back home is a very kind of nice, easy, linear kind of journey. And they took some left turns and some right turns, but you always know where you're going to end up, like where you're headed. And so like it doesn't need to be super complicated, does it? And the patter was really good. And I mean, the whole kind of like, pirate lore and the pirate code in Star Wars, it just kind of works. It goes so hand in hand because it's a bit like the Force. It's as vague and as specific as you kind of want it to be, right? So it's
love that,
but it's fun. And ultimately, I think every episode there was at least one or two scenes which kind of actually did make me laugh out loud. It was funny, be it like something to do with Neil falling on his face or whatever, or sitting on his trunk. There was just a really good vibe, and that obviously came from the writing but also from the directing and just everything, how it's been just kind of crafted.
Yeah, it was top talent on it as well. I mean, top directors who have just, one just won the Oscar for Everything Everywhere All at Once. The other guy just did Twisters, who's just worked with ILM. So Excuse me. And you've got Bryce Dallas Howard as well, who's obviously been on everything. Her hit ratio is incredible, apart from the episode with Lizzo, Jack Black, and Christopher Lloyd. But hey ho, can't have everything. But so you've got and John Watson and Chris Ford have just come off the Spider-Man trilogy. They made, the last one made nearly $2 billion. So they know how to direct and pull everything together. And I like the fact that whilst it definitely, having Vane in there and a few other elements, it felt like you knew you were in that Mando area.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like, I could be wrong. Hopefully we've got like a behind the scenes thing coming soon, whatever they call Disney Gallery now, but it didn't feel to me like Favreau and Filoni was sitting on their shoulders.
Right. Yeah.
Overarching it. There's got to be connective. It's in the Mandoverse. They're very, protective of that storyline. We know this because there's nothing has spun off from the Mandoverse yet, only adaptations. So we know that they're protective of it, but it just felt like it was its own thing that just happened to take place in that time period.
And and actually that, to your point, if you almost remove the references to like the New Republic event, most of that adventure could happen at any point in the timeline. You could literally just transport those kids and they could have exactly the same kind of adventure in the High Republic or even the Old Republic or, the new Republic, so... and I think that's kind of how it works, because then like you're not reliant on the timeline so much to tell the stories, but actually you're just kind of creating the good stories that can inhabit that timeline.
And Mark, you mentioned it, the pirate code kind of being like how the Force is, to where it's fun, it's got some mystery wrapped into it. I look back and I started just like the Y-wing is my favorite ship, as I was showing you earlier. I think back to the Marvel comics when Luke, Han, and Leia were constantly running into, in the 70s, they were running into space pirates. There was pirates involved, and they played it just like they were in a pirate ship, right? And so that even tied that back into that for me to feel like a comfort zone or a comfort level for me. So, and
it's funny that, like you say, Star Wars has always taken cues from a lot other franchises, vibes and tones. Obviously, this is Goonies, E.T. and all that sort of stuff. And it's done it before with thrillers and mysteries. You had the Zillo Beast was their Godzilla episode, But you can be too on the nose sometimes. And they could have really been too on the nose of the pirate stuff. They could have really gone Pirates of the Caribbean with it. I parlay this, but they didn't quite go that far.
No.
They went far enough with Nick Frost doing the ooh-ah pirate thing. That was as far as it needed to go. But I think they just walked that line really, really well, because it evokes enough of it for you to get what they're getting at. So now you've added another element. But like you say, Joe, Crimson Jack, he stole the name.
There we go.
So, there's a character from the 70s right there. What's Luke doing when he's going off the skiff with Return of the Jedi? He's walking the plank. So we've had pirate stuff in Star Wars, as you say, for decades. It's the first time, though, that it's been right in your face. And how beautifully has it fit? We've had the smuggler thing with Solo. Yeah. We've had the bounty hunter thing with Mando. Now we've got the pirate thing with Skeleton Crew. It's just building I'm thinking more underworld stuff. He's building this interesting underworld. So whatever comes next, Mando and Grogu's bringing in Rot of the Hutt. We've got Jabba's kid coming in. So it's there to be done. It's all there to go.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer. While I really enjoyed the Republic and the clones versus the Droid Army in the prequels, and I really enjoyed the Rebels versus the Empire during the original trilogy. I think we've all discussed this before at a different time. I think the sequels maybe could have done better by doing something like the Yuzong Vong or something from the New Jedi Order, instead of bringing just, hey, this is Empire 2.0 in the First Order. But be that as it may, all these universe buildings that we're doing, whether it's the bounty hunters, the Mandos, the pirates, the underworld, all those things, for future movies, we now don't have to just focus on these guys in these hats, those guys in those hats, fighting a war, right? It's out there now.
Well, this is actually one thing that, if you look at a lot of the series, with probably the exception of Kenobi, but you take the original trilogy, you take the prequel trilogy, and even the sequel trilogies, you take the films, like the saga films, it's very black and white. It's very good versus evil, like you said. But a lot of these Disney Plus streaming shows, it's all about shades of grey, isn't it? It's all about like, it's either switching allegiances or potentially, you have your own internal moral code, like with Mando and stuff. And it's quite interesting because like we don't really, up until this time, we haven't really had a huge amount of exploration of that kind of grey area.
No, that's a good point. That's interesting. I've never thought of it that way. Why didn't you say this on Making Tracks? Come on, Mark.
I was going to save it for next week's episode.
Well, there, save it. Put a pin in it.
Record.
Put a pin in it. Yeah, I'll cut this and edit it. But no, I know you guys are going to do a final recap of this, so I don't want to get too into it. I want to make sure we covered some of those other topics. So, anything else going on in the Fantha Tracks and Making Tracks world? I think we tied a good little ribbon around Skeleton Crew right there. Are you guys going to any, besides Celebration Japan, are you guys going to any upcoming events? I know, Mark, you mentioned 25th anniversary of the Rebel Legion, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things going on there. Other things you guys have coming up, or other projects you guys have coming up soon that people will want to go check out or listen to you guys talk about?
We've got 5 shows involved in Star Wars Podcast Day, which we need to get stuck into fairly soon. So that'll be fun. There's us doing an episode, Start Your Engines, Planet Layer, Desert Planet Discs, and Collecting Tracks. So we've got all those shows doing like little mini 15, 20-minute episodes for Podcast Day. I'm involved in a show coming up called Festival of the Force, which is the start of next month in Newark, which is about an hour north of me. So I'm doing some stage hosting there. So there's some good guests coming there. So we'll have some content from that. Are you at that, Mark? Are you coming to that?
I might do. Excellent.
Your name's on the list. And then we'll have all the normal stuff. We've got LFCC coming in the summer, all the MCMs. Space Centre got announced, or hopefully a date's been sorted out for that.
Date's been
June.
confirmed. Yeah, end of June for that.
Looking forward
to that. I won't be going to that. I'm going to
You're going to see Iron Maiden, aren't you? Yeah.
Oh.
Very good. So that'll be fun. Yeah. So there's plenty going on.
You got it. Well, we just plan to keep on doing our thing here at Rule the Galaxy. Because we passed our 300th episode, we didn't really do a big fanfare. We wanted to wait and do something more when we could all be together. And since D-Doc lives in Philadelphia and the rest of us are in Indiana, we are going to try to meet up in March and do an event at the Great Ohio Toy Show, which is one of my favorite toy shows ever. It's just incredible. So we're going to try to meet up in Ohio and all of us do a day of filming and recording and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of us right now. I don't know if we're going to ICCC this year. I don't think we've got the press pass, the media pass. So
shocking.
Yeah, so we might be on the outside looking in on that one. But and speaking of that, the gentleman who just passed, Angus
McInnes.
Angus, sorry, yes. At the ICCC last year, Alfie, D-Doc, and Brent were there. I couldn't make it. I had a family event going that same weekend. Angus was there, and he just went and sat in their hotel room, and they had beverages, and they just sat and talked about life. Alfie said they talked a little Star Wars, and then he just talked about his life and his career and things like that. And they spent a few hours just sitting there doing that, and it hit all of them very difficult. I know you two have gotten a chance to meet him. Mm. I'm sorry I butchered his name there. It was just I was blanking it out, but a person like that doesn't have to take the time to go and sit and do that kind of stuff.
No.
And he just wanted to do it because they were being cool to him and having good conversations. And he said, like, let's just go hang out and let's go have a beer or two and talk about life. And they all were pretty hit by it. So it's very cool when you get to interact real life with this Star Wars community we're a part of. So hats off to him. R.I.P. Good member of the Star Wars community right there. So I know you guys. I think you mentioned on your show you met him a handful of times, correct? Or done interviews with him a handful of times?
Mark had met him numerous times through the Legion, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Various different events. And I think that's one very interesting point. Well, not interesting point, but something to kind of remember, I think, whenever you meet any kind of like a talent from Star Wars, especially the older talent who were in the OT. So actually, that was such a short period of their life, and they've done so much since then. And so, I mean, I do it like, you know, when we sometimes chat with some of the others, is actually just try and learn more about actually what they did afterwards, or even before, you know, because I mean, everybody's asked him, like, you know, how did he get into Star Wars? Are you still surprised almost 50 years on that Star Wars is so popular? All those kind of questions gets asked like day in, day out at every single convention. So if you can sit down and can go, hey, so, you know, what do you think about this? And just have a conversation with a guy over a couple of beers, that will probably mean more to him than just $20 and you know, a signature. So yeah.
No, that's a good way to tie that up there. So, guys, I know, Mark, you're finishing up at work. I'm taking my lunch break to do this, so I don't mean to cut it short because I could sit and talk to you guys for hours because I've got other notes of things to talk about, but I unfortunately have to go back to the job. You guys, I look forward to meeting up with you soon, hanging out, talking more, going over more things. You are always just such a big supporter of what we do and being on the show. I can't thank you enough, taking the time out of your busy schedule. So thank you, and look forward to actually crossing paths with you and not just knowing each other through a screen and a microphone. So thank you.
No, thank you. It's always fun coming on.
For having us. Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to go and clean the air fryer. I've got to go and clean the air fryer now. It's got chicken juice all over it. So that's my day. That's the rest of my day.
Well, I'm glad you got that air fryer. That is a fantastic thing to have, and it does change the world when you can just throw that stuff in there and heat it up and eat it. So, real quick before we go, what's the best way for everybody to follow or listen to all the things you guys do? I know you just rattled off all the show names, but what's the best place for our listeners to go and follow what you guys do?
Go to fanthatracks.com and go to any of the socials and just find us at Fantha Tracks. So we're everywhere at Fantha Tracks, but always aim for the site first, fanthatracks.com. You'll find pretty much everything we do out from there. So that's always the best way to do it.
Okay. And it's also always important for me to mention this because it's not fair for Mark to do it, because Mark does, like, literally Mark runs literally Fantha Tracks pretty much. He's the guy who's posting pretty much like 90% of all the articles and stuff. It's all done for free. There's no Patreon. There's no subscription.
That's awesome.
We don't do it to get paid. We just do it for the love of the force. So if you want to hurl abuse at me specifically, which you're always welcome to, then I'm at markbase_81 on Instagram, and Mr. Newbold is prefect_timing.
You got it. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for our fans, our followers, our listeners. We don't have fans. We're goofy guys who talk about Star Wars. To our listeners, followers, thank you so much. And we're just glad that we can have entertaining, informative people like these two Marks on here for you. Look forward to you coming back and listen to us again. Until next time, may the Force be with you.
We're your fans.
I'm going to leave that in there.
I say that to him all the time.